Are you ready for another Gothamchess recap? Because I know I am. It's the first semifinal in the Speed Chess Championship, which is hosted on chess.com with over $250,000 in prizes. Hikaru Nakamura versus Wesley. So, a nice, intense rivalry. They've played in the last two finals of the SEC, and Wesley just knocked out Hikaru before he won the Skilling Open. So Hikaru was out for revenge. We're going to look at a bunch of games. I've put timestamps on the video player to break up the segments. 90 minutes of 5+1, 60 minutes of 3+1, and 30 minutes of 1+1. We're also going to have some clips intertwined in the action. Let's go. We kick things off with the 5+1 Blitz. They started a little bit slow with 2 draws. Also, I will have a little scorecard that I'll keep over there at the bottom at the end of each segment to make sure we all know the score. Now, it's game 3. Hikaru's got the white pieces, and what we're going to see a lot of in this match is e4, e5. So just bear with me. There's nothing I can do to make it more exciting when 2 super GMs play. It's, you know, sometimes like 2 grandpas fighting it out in a nursing home with how repetitive it might look, but don't worry. All right, we get a Berlin, kind of an anti-Berlin with d3. And knight d4, so this is already a very confrontational move, not something that we're used to seeing. And the point is that now Hikaru goes for this move, knight a3, and knight c4 is available in the future. Kind of a non-standard development, okay? Players got nice and cozy in the middle of the board, and the first kind of exciting break into the territory happens here with the move knight to f5. Hikaru's setting up some sort of attack on Wesley's king. Wesley chops it off and really pushes for a queen trade here. As you can see, Hikaru not obliging. Rook d8, h3 attacking the queen back, queen e6, queen g3. And here's something very strange happened. Hikaru played bishop g5. Wesley played h6, Hikaru went back, Wesley attacked him again, and Hikaru went back again. It was like the weirdest thing. He wasn't doing anything with the bishop. I guess his logic was that I'm going to make Wesley push his pawn, and somehow that's going to be beneficial for me. But in reality, Wesley just got some play against this bishop. Like, Wesley just went immediately pressuring on this side of the board, and then went back with his bishop now, because this is a little bit destabilized. Queen f3, rook d6, and finally broke in with d takes c3. Bishop c3, he doubled up, king h1. Now a very instructive move from Wesley. It's a very advanced concept. Which of your pieces do you want to trade? And Wesley plays the move bishop d4. Nice move. His intention is to leave Hikaru with a light squared bishop, which is blocked behind the pawns. Something, you know, bishop and knight versus 2 bishops. 2 bishops want open space. They want more trades. And you can isolate your opponent with a bad bishop. Hikaru breaks rather than taking the bishop with f4, but Wesley already prepared a reroute with his knight to the central squares, and we see that Wesley is gripping, death grip there on the dark squares, while the light squared bishop on c2 can't go anywhere, and Wesley shattered the center with this pawn push c5, c4, and a few moves later, his rook got in, he took a bishop, and on move 42, Hikaru resigned the game, and Wesley So struck first in the semifinal. Wesley So now up 2-1. All right, we go to the very next game. Now Wesley's got the white pieces, and Hikaru busts out a Najdorf Sicilian. A Sicilian, which is very crazy, very theoretical, very popular at the top level. And here Wesley plays the freak attack, all right? He plays the freak attack. It goes rook g1, okay? Rook g1 here is a wild move. Essentially, what you're trying to do is you're trying to play the move g4, and what that does is it creates an attack on the knight and kicks the knight back, and of course, white is not going to castle on this side of the board anymore, okay? Hikaru sees that coming, slides the knight back, but Wesley pushing. It's like the weirdest opening. I mean, it looks like, you know, Hikaru's playing, a subscriber, like, who's like 700-800 or something. He's just like pushing all his pawns. It's a real thing, though. This is, like, actually not bad at all. White takes a lot of space, and it's not so easy to attack. And then Wesley even breaks with g6 and leaves that very nagging pawn there. Hikaru ends up castling a short while later in this position, but then Wesley says, dude, really? Transfers his queen over there. You can't take it because you're pinned. Rook f6, and then a few moves later, plays bishop takes h6. I mean, this is everything that Wesley So's been working for in this position. It's like the whole opening. So, you know, Hikaru says, I bet you won't. I bet you won't. You know, like those guys that like try to fight but don't really want to fight. What? But Wesley takes on h6. And this position is brutally challenging to defend from a practical standpoint, because white has 6 pawns, you have 4, so you're gonna need down 1 pawn for a bishop, and your piece is kind of out of the way, and Wesley dropped his rook back to transfer it over to this side, slid back to avoid the trade of queens. Very instructive moment here, avoiding the trade of queens. Hikaru plays d5 to break and then push this pawn forward, but Wesley is able to create this nice bind. And after bishop takes f2, it looks like you have to move your rook, but Wesley finds a beautiful tactical shot here. Queen to h7 check, which is not a queen trade because you can't take, because you are going to get ladder mated in the middle of a game. Actually, rook h3 is not a ladder mate. There would be rook h6, but I think the point is that what happens in this endgame is you just end up down a pawn, and you're probably going to lose this pawn. So, fake ladder mate, but, well, it is what it is. I lied. I'm sorry. I'm not a politician, but I'm pretty close. So, queen h7, and then Hikaru doesn't take on h7. He plays king f8. Plays king f8. And now this gives Wesley rook h3. So now the queen is defended, not with a pawn, but with a rook. And still the best thing to do would be to take, play gh7, king f7, and like sacrifice the rook, for example. But Hikaru thinks down to like 2 seconds and plays queen g8, queen b7, and now you cannot stop g7. And one more move was played here, queen takes g6, because Hikaru had like 2 seconds on the clock. He just like played queen g6, I mean, just to not lose on time, and resigned again. Wesley To now has a 3-1 lead, but so did Golden State, and we all know how that ended. I don't know if this match ends the same. I'm not going to spoil it. Yeah, man, what a choke by Golden State, huh? So, and the Clippers, if we're being serious. So the next game, Hikaru's got white, and he's now down 2 games, okay? So, he's got to start making some sort of comeback, or else Wesley's going to run away with this match. So like I said, we get another Spanish, we get another anti-Berlin, and Hikaru plays the move queen to e2, okay? Which is a slight deviation from normal, and actually at this point, I will show the first clip. They had a very similar position in one of their earlier games, and I'm just realizing that I never showed you that clip because that game ended in a draw, but I'm going to show you it now. There was a very funny moment in a very similar structure when they both looked up at the ceiling. Right? So they both look up at the ceiling as if they're like total cyborgs, which is really funny. Two super GMs who are thinking, gotta look up at the ceiling for inspiration. I just wanted to throw that in there. It wasn't exactly this game, but I didn't want to restart the entire video, so bear with me. I hope you're having a good time. You're amazing, by the way, if you've made it this far in the video. Only 8 minutes, but still, all the same. And in this game, Wesley got real hostile with our boy here. Well, with my boy. Maybe not necessarily with our boy, but, you know, it was also Hikaru's birthday. One thing, oh my god, I'm missing everything. It was also Hikaru's birthday. They're playing on Hikaru's birthday. We know what Wesley did to Magnus on his birthday. I probably should just refilm the whole thing, but whatever, we're gonna keep on going. Knight d2, and Wesley getting real nice and hostile here, bringing the knight to f4, pushing the pawns in front of his king, attacking the queen and the pawn. Hikaru chops and says, I don't feel so safe over there. I'm gonna castle long. Wesley says, ha ha, where are you going? a4. b5, b4. Hikaru says, I'm not gonna address this because all there is here is a pawn. Knight g4 hitting your queen. Queen g7, now I'll address it, and now knight f3. And the key here for Hikaru to open up the king side will be breaking with a pawn. Wesley flying in on the queen side. Wesley flying in on the queen side, bishop c4. Now, instructive moment. Rook g1, bishop g4, hg4, and a3. Okay, very instructive moment here. Hikaru doesn't take, and he doesn't even push. He does not push this pawn. Why? He doesn't push it because if you push it, you create some dark square weaknesses for black, like black can get in. Instead, Hikaru wants ab2 to happen, so he'll play king b1. Very instructive moment here. This is called the umbrella pawn, where you allow your opponent to take, but your king hides behind the pawn and is actually relatively safe, so long as black doesn't end up with a knight on one of these 2 squares, but I don't see any horses falling out of the sky anytime soon. So, g5, c6 from Wesley, and here Hikaru plays king b1. And during the game, I got really hyped. Because after rook a5, I realized the point. Hikaru played king b1 preemptively because he's a genius. Because his idea here is to play g takes f4, knight takes f4, and disregard the attack on the queen and strike back at Wesley's queen. Then if you get this, Hikaru is completely winning by virtue of rook g7, bishop f7, knight h4, knight g6. Why did Hikaru have to play king b1 to accomplish this? Because had he done it in this version, or rather had he done it in this version, knight takes e2 comes with a check. So Hikaru finds one quiet king move, which ultimately leads to the absolute devastation of Wesley's position. Wesley is unable to deal with the shredding open of his position, and a few moves later, a gorgeous geometric idea here you cannot take because I take and you are pinned. Your knight is not actually defending. Rook g4 is a kill shot. Bishop on b4 is falling, this is collapsing, and Hikaru, in emphatic fashion, strikes back to cut the lead to 1. All right, next game. We're a couple games into the future now. We get another very common opening, but now Wesley So goes for d5, not d6. You'll notice that's the difference. What happens now is the center opens up a little bit early. Both players castle short. It's going to be a maneuvering game because the structure is very similar. Now, short while later, okay, right around here during the live stream, I started explaining to people why white is better, okay, and I'm going to teach you right now how to evaluate a position of chess. You've probably heard me say this here and there, but now we're going to learn it more formally. Okay. How do you evaluate a chess position? Number 1, who's up material? Equal in this case. Number 2, whose king is safer? Equal in this case. Number 3, who's got more active pieces? All right, white. What does that mean? It's squares that you control. Fighting for squares in your opponent's territory. You're gonna tell me this is an active bishop? I'm gonna smack you upside the head if you say this bishop is a statue, all right? It's a nice little thing you put on your table in your living room because it looks pretty, but it ain't going anywhere, it's too damn heavy. That bishop literally has no legal moves. So the bishop on e8 is nobody. And the last thing is pawn structure and space. Wesley has doubled c-pawns, and Hikaru has an outside pass pawn in all endgames. So Hikaru's got a slightly better position here. As the game progresses, Wesley begins creating counterplay on the other side of the board to deal with the fact that his position is slightly worse. The problem in doing this is he has to lose material. Well, he loses his c6 pawn first and foremost, and then the queens get traded, so now Wesley's going to be down 1 pawn. He's still able to create some counterplay, but he ends up sacrificing some material, but he really damages his structure. Notice he has 3 pawns on the dark squares, and they're all separated. What does that mean? It means they're targets, and Hikaru's going to try to feast on them. Knight g5, bishop e8, bishop e3. We also have an issue where the king is stuck on the back rank. Bishop c5, rook e7, and bishop f2, bishop h4. And a few moves later, Wesley was unable to hang on to one of his things, and then he was unable to hang on to the last one. And the game ends with Hikaru taking the second pawn, and Wesley resigns again, and now Hikaru has struck back, and the match is all square. The last decisive match, decisive game, I should say, in this segment, in the 5+1 segment, came right here. And then we will watch a funny clip after. So another e4, e5. I'm being put to sleep, but it's okay. Now notice, by the way, this knight a3 thing, we saw Hikaru play it earlier, but in this case, it's actually Wesley playing it. I'm going to just kind of breeze through the moves here. Look at Hikaru. Hikaru says, I haven't castled this way, right? I haven't castled this way. So what does that mean? You've already castled, right? So what does that mean? It means I can push my pawns. It means I can go for your bishop. Let me get that bishop. Wesley says, Hikaru says, yeah, I'm coming. I'm coming. G4. G4. Bishop d2. Strike back in the center too. Get this knight away from controlling this so I can hit you with the queen diagonal. Bam, bam, knight e3. Now here Hikaru did something I didn't quite like, but it doesn't matter because I'm not as strong as him. My opinion in this case is irrelevant. But I will give you a piece of advice. When you are attacking, you want to avoid a side of the board locking up. And in this position, the side of the board has now locked up. However, Hikaru was thinking more long-term. In all endgames, this pawn will be a terrible weakness, actually these 2 pawns, because this pawn is constantly on the threat of promotion, and it's going to be difficult for you to move your king, because this pawn's going to be weak forever. So, you know, Hikaru can see like 25 moves ahead. I'm not sure we all can. I mean, you know, you guys can, I can't. So be very careful when you're attacking to not lock up the position. Anyway, Hikaru has to deal with Wesley coming in now down the center of the board. We get queen d6, queen e2, bishop f4. Hikaru gives away the bishop to create some stability. Notice he's got a dark squared attacker versus a piece that doesn't see half the board. That bishop only sees 32 squares, all right? So the good thing is when you have knight and bishop, you need to create a color complex that negates the effect of the enemy bishop and facilitates the movement of your own piece. This knight is beautiful here. Not just beautiful, it's also powerful, unlike that bishop that we saw in the last game. The pawns here, very nice, shutting down the dark squares as well. And Hikaru is able to create this beautiful fortress away from the pawn, from the bishop hitting the pawn. He then takes on e5, and then right here plays the move d4, sacrificing a pawn temporarily to win it back and open up the lines for his rook. Rook e5, rook takes pawn, Wesley tries to sneak in from the back, but after rook d2, the game is just over because once again, that pawn way back when that Hikaru pinpointed said, that pawn, we going for it, all right? We are going to get it, and he does, okay? Now, at this point, the final game of the 5+1, they actually drew, okay? They drew. This next game that I'm going to pull up is the first game of the 3+1, but I want to show you a clip. At the end of the 5+1 segment, as they repeated the moves, watch what Hikaru was doing. He was bobbing up and down like a boxer. Watch Hikaru. He was like totally, I mean, it was like, what is going on with Hikaru? You know, like what is happening? What like, you know, they're repeating moves. So you'll notice that here in a second, the game is going to end with a draw as the official result. Wesley's going to realize he's got nothing. Watch Hikaru. Hikaru bolts out of the room. And the hypothesis there was that he had to pee so badly that he was just, you know, for 4 or 5 straight minutes. We've all been there. You know, we've all been there. I once had to hold that in on like a 2-hour bus ride. It's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling. So respect to him for keeping himself together. And the first segment ends with the score 5-4. Hikaru is up 5-4 after the 5+1. Let's move to the 3+1. Hikaru gets back from the bathroom. We get e4, e5. We get a Berlin with an early move d5. All right, we get some theory on the board, and Wesley's trying to trap Hikaru's bishop. Hikaru castles. He castles because if in this position you play the move a5, there is bishop takes f2 check, which looks really stupid. It looks like you're trying to play atomic chess, but you're not. Because after king f2, you have e4. And the problem is that this king is just stuck in the middle. If d takes e4, you have knight takes e4, queen can come to f6 hitting this. You have this kind of also pin on the rook. This is kind of well known to be okay for black. I promise I'm not lying to you this time. I lied to you earlier, but that was unintentional. But what happens in this game is Hikaru plays the move e4, take, 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 and trades the queen's takes and gets his bishop trapped. That's it. Literally, this is how the 3+1 began. Hikaru plays theory, but accidentally plays an incorrect move. You are not supposed to take the queen, because in this position, if you don't take the queen, if they take you, you are no longer trapped. At least you can get away, okay? And if they, after bishop takes e4, play the move a5, trying to trap you this way, you have this nice move queen f4. That's the point. The point according to theory. If a takes b6, you take on f3, this is here, and this is here. That is the idea. That is why you don't trade the queen. Hikaru, after this, did get it right, but in this particular game, he did not. And what ends up happening is the very first game of the 3+1 goes to Wesley, and it's 5-5. Okay? It's simply 5-5. Now, in the second game of 3+1, it's now time for Hikaru to strike back. So we go to the second game. He's got the white pieces. Another Berlin. These guys paved, I mean, new infrastructure in the city of Berlin and the theory of the Berlin. Hikaru pushing out with a nice big fat center. A trade in the center plays a4, which prevents black from playing b5. But again, Wesley's going for these king-side shenanigans. Plants a knight on f4, which is... Oh, that knight is good. That's a good piece. And you're never going to get this guy out of here, because if you play g3, there is knight takes pawn with the bishop. So I don't like this at all. Queen f6, and he trades off the knight. All right? Trades off, but now we got the 2 bishops. Rook d1, queen g6. You are pinning the pawn to the king, and this is happening. All right? King h1, and Wesley opens up the line for his dark squared bishop on this diagonal. Hikaru sacrifices a pawn to win this pawn back on f4, but the bishop comes right back. Queen goes out to h5, and Wesley uses this key move f6 to shatter the center. Hikaru then has to play queen e4 to defend himself. Now Wesley plays f5, and the key move comes right here. A timely move, pushing all the pawns in front of your own king to attack, and we coming. And the defenses slowly start collapsing, but Hikaru was actually very much in this game until after queen e5, queen f6, he played the move knight f3, not realizing that when Wesley takes back, this is not the end of the story. Knight takes e5 completely removes your rook from protecting your own pawn, and rook takes, there is bishop takes. Crazy. I mean, that this was missed, unbelievable, and that's exactly how the game ends up just finishing. Wesley just snatches up a few pawns, and I'm not actually sure what exactly this was. I don't know if it was a slip or something, but it might have been Hikaru going for bishop b3, rook g4. I don't know. I just remember that this happened. But even without rook f4, the game is actually already lost because black is just breaking out. Black has won all the pawns. So now Wesley is up 6-5 after winning the first two 3+1 games. Okay? So we've got the next 3+1 game. Hikaru's got to stop the bleeding. Hikaru's got the black pieces. We get a Najdorf. This was a very long game. Okay? I'm actually going to jump all the way ahead to move 40, where it's rook bishop knight versus rook bishop knight, opposite colored bishops, and one pawn. You got to look at where the pawns are. Hikaru's got 3 together. Wesley's got 1 on the queen side. So Hikaru's moving around here, trying to, you know, put some pressure on Wesley's weaknesses, but overall this position is very equal. And you will notice very shortly what ends up happening. Wesley starts pushing this pawn, and he kind of very freely pushes this pawn all the way down until it gets lost. The problem with it being lost is that the opposite colored bishops will lead to an endgame draw. That's what's going to happen. Unless, and this is why you keep playing, king d7, bishop a7, unless you do the one thing that you can do in an endgame when there's horsies on the board. You can hang a fork. Wesley So, after winning the first 2 games of the 3+1, blunders a fork in an endgame. And that's it. And now Hikaru is level at 6-6. Actually, the funniest part about this game was probably Hikaru's reaction during it, which I will show you in a second. So, where are the pieces? What's going on? Where are the pieces? The pieces just vanished. Come back. Pieces. Hello? Hello? Thank you. Okay, you're back. Terrific. This is still gonna go in the video, by the way. Look at this. Hikaru's I've never seen someone so angry at winning a game. Watch. Hikaru's frustrated that the endgame is a draw at first. He's very frustrated because he felt he was better. Now watch how angry he gets when the fork is blundered. He's verbally frustrated and swearing at himself, at I don't even know what. Okay, instead of being like, woohoo, I want a piece. We all know, you and me, we wouldn't get mad. If that happens, if that were to happen, I would have celebrated. Not Hikaru. He means business. All right. So Hikaru wins that game, and now we go to the second to last game of the 3+1. Another e4, e5. This one we're gonna cruise through the middle game. We're gonna get to the most important moment, which is right here. Wesley does not castle, plays h4, h5, and knight h4. Telegraphing a plan to go to f5 with his knight. Except actually, he wasn't planning to go to f5 at all. Hikaru missed what he was trying to do, which is the move knight to g6. And all of a sudden, your bishop has no life. That's not like I'm saying it can't like do anything. I'm not saying it's like, you know, it has no life, you know, like the insult. No, I'm not saying bishop, you're good. The problem is if this happens, this has no defense. And the rook is open and this is just lost. And Hikaru tries to create some complications, but Wesley is just killing him on the open files here. And one beautiful move that Wesley found was after queen takes e4, Hikaru looking to sacrifice some material here. Wesley doesn't even take and plays the cool, calm, and collected rook to g6. The pin is here. You cannot take. You cannot take this rook. Beautiful. And just absolutely gets in here, queen h4, a quiet move offering a trade of queens, and this time, I am not lying to you, it's gonna be ladder mate. Nothing you can do. If I play the move rook to d7, you lose in even more beautiful fashion. Rook g8 check, rook g8, and rook g8 is mate. King cannot take, and the queen cannot take because of the pin. So, Wesley, Wesley wins, and he is now up by 1. Okay, he is now up by 1, and we will get to the last game of the 3+1 in a second. Here comes the last game. Okay, here comes the last game. Wesley with the 1 included draw. Hikaru now has 6.5, and Wesley has 7.5. Going into the final game here. Actually, it's 7.5 to 8.5. So 7.5 for Hikaru, including all the draws that they had. 7.5 to 8.5. Going into the final game of 3+1. You guys want a scoreboard? You got a scoreboard. It's a Sicilian defense, and Hikaru plays a very offbeat system, a very early break e5. This is non-standard, totally non-standard, but Hikaru's got to play for the win here in the final game, and he does. He tries to make the position super weird. It's already super weird, something we haven't seen yet, and then he trades and plays f4, corralling the move e5 from black. We get g6, knight routes back, nice little kind of pretty structure here. So b5 is never possible, and f5. Now, knight h3, queen takes, knight g5, we're going for this. Knight to c7, rook e2, we're doubling up because we're going for this. Bishop f6, we say we're not going for that anymore. Knight f3, we're going for this. Knight a8, rook e3, I don't know what we're going for anymore. Knight b6, bishop e2, I don't know what we're going for. King f7, g4, oh damn, what? What is this? That's a sneaky move. The point of this is that it's a sacrifice of a pawn, and you're trying to get the pawn in this way. This is bait, is what that is. You guys know that meme? That's bait? Yeah, Wesley shouldn't have taken this, because he did, got hit with check, bishop takes, and now bishop takes g4. And this transformation of the position leaves him with a terrible weakness on e6. The rook gets traded, rook h3, and a terrible weakness all the way on h7. A nice transformation from Hikaru, and just a few short moves later, he was picking up all of the pawns on the king side, and Wesley resigns because there's nothing he can do to defend himself as his knight is completely stranded from the game. He will be at least a pawn down and likely 2, and at the end of the 3+1 portion of this match, it is 8.5 to 8.5. Let's go to 30 minutes of 1+1 bullet. We begin the bullet section. Hikaru plays b3, g6, and we get an imbalanced kind of structure already. Wesley goes for a break in the center, and Hikaru plays for c4, trading off his central pawn for a flank pawn, but difficult for Wesley to get any openings here. And Wesley kind of got confrontational quickly, trying to trade off some pieces to basically say, look, man, I'm going to attack you on the queen side. Hikaru says, come and get me, brother. Queen a5 from Wesley. Queen b2, rook f b8. This is actually very clever from Wesley, and he's making Hikaru work early on. Hikaru says h4. Wesley says, hey, h4, where are you? No. f4 now. So Hikaru just doesn't care about his weaknesses. He's going straight in. Wesley correctly goes for a queen trade. Hikaru correctly goes for no queen trade. Wesley correctly goes for a queen trade. Hikaru correctly doesn't go for a queen trade. Wesley plays knight g4, rook e1, queen b2 check, king g8, rook e2. Wesley again goes for a queen trade. Hikaru doesn't want a queen trade. Wesley once again goes for a queen trade. Hikaru doesn't want a queen trade. Queen d8, knight f3, and later in this game, on move 35, there was something beautiful missed. In this position, Wesley saw that his bishop was hanging, and so was this pawn, and he moved his bishop. But if he had taken the pawn and sacrificed the bishop, he could have put extra pressure on the new d-file on this. And if Hikaru had played rook d2, take, dynamite strikes. Rook takes d1. And if queen takes d1, queen e3. If you go here, you get mated. If you go here, knight f2 wins your queen. And if you go king h2, it's illegal and your opponent slaps you because you can't go there. I don't know what would have happened differently, but that was a huge miss. And Hikaru immediately pounced on the opportunity that was missed by playing f5. Knight e5 and knight g5, and all of a sudden the center is blocked and it's Hikaru who's attacking. Rook b3, fe6, fe6, rook e6, and tragedy strikes for Wesley So, rook e8 check. And the king can only go here, which would walk into a fork, and Wesley So resigns. Hikaru wins the first bullet game. We move to a game a little bit further down the line. This was a 108 move game, so I'm going to go right ahead to the end game. It was king, rook, and pawn versus king and rook, Wesley defending. Now remember, this is 1+1, so that there's a live clock constantly ticking down how much time you have left. So if you get an endgame like this, and you are up on the overall score, you should milk the clock. It is part of the rules, it's completely legal, and you should do it. You shouldn't agree to the draw if the endgame is a draw. So Hikaru, for the longest time, was shuffling around, gaining time, and waiting for his moment. And of course, when people do this, the fans get very upset. People who want to see the guy win, who's on the losing side. Some people get very upset, which I think is crazy, because it's 100% part of the rules. Anybody can do it, by the way. If Wesley did it to Hikaru, it's completely fair game. But in doing this, Hikaru pushed his pawn all the way, and right around here, Wesley just had a lapse. And I'll show you what he did. Hikaru snuck in, and Wesley, just because he had been shuffling his king back and forth, just played king d7, and now it's a losing endgame. Because now you play rook b8, and what happens is white cannot trade the rook, black cannot trade the rook, because the pawn will promote, and if the rook moves somewhere, which it does, king b6 attacks the rook, and the pawn just has an easy way to the finish line. And if you go something like this, then I'm going to play king b6, and my pawn's going to go. What did Wesley blunder? This is an instructive moment. Rather than king d7, if Wesley had played something like rook b1 here, and the same thing happens with rook to b8, then you go something like rook a1. That's the difference, is you have distance on the king. And if king b6, you can give a check. And now the king can't go to a5 because you would lose the rook. So you have to go back. But because Wesley's rook is on the wrong rank, it's on the 5th rank rather than keeping a distance, he's not able to give a check. And what happens is he moves the rook in front of the pawn, but now he can't give a check, and he actually loses. This game was huge because Hikaru took a 2-game lead, and this game, because it went 100 moves, wasted like 5 minutes of clock time. This was a huge, huge, huge win for Hikaru on his quest for glory. And now comes the 3rd game. Wesley needs to strike back. We get a King's Indian structure, actually just a mainline King's Indian, and the players lock the center, and the fireworks begin. H6, bishop f6, bishop g5. An instructive moment here. Hikaru playing a more tranquil version of a King's Indian, creating this impenetrable fortress of pawns. You cannot break with h4, and you cannot break with f4. Giving a check doesn't mean anything. Many of us wouldn't like this because there's a check, but the king just hides. And again, the match strategy is I'm up 2 games. I'm going to make the position closed. I'm going to make it harder for my opponent to win. So Wesley was picking and prodding, and actually it was Hikaru who started instigating on the queen side, and Wesley was picking and prodding and maneuvering and finally said, okay, I gotta go for something or else I'm gonna run out of time, all right? And notice again, there's just endless shuffling, totally locked structure of pawns. Don't you just hate these positions? And what ends up happening is as the queen side begins to simplify, okay, notice there's just a lot of shuffling. Queen trade is now occurring. The queens are off. Wesley plays rook b3, knight c8, knight d1, rook to a7. Hikaru wants to break in. Knight c3, rook a8. Hikaru's like, come and get me. Come and get me. Everything's protected. Come and get me. I'm going to take... Ooh, I'm going to get this pawn now. Bishop a5, knight b6. Bishop goes back, knight c8. Let's repeat moves. Wesley says no. Well, actually, that's actually not even accurate. It's Hikaru who plays rook a8 and says no. Not free because of this. Wesley plays b6 and blunders that pawn is actually not guarded. Knight b6, and this position should not be quite lost yet for white, but all of a sudden the bishop is stuck, and once this pawn gets going, this pawn really gets going, this pawn really gets going, and you can't take it because rook a2. And so after c2, bishop e3, there's rook a1, promotion square is covered, bishop c2, rook a2, and after bishop e3, rook a1, Wesley resigns again, and goes down 3 games. And it was at this moment that the match was all but mathematically decided. The next game, they traded blows for a little bit, and then Wesley won a couple, but he never got closer than 2. He actually won the very, very last game of the match, but time was already up, And the final score, after Hikaru takes this 3-game lead in the bullet, ends 13.5 to 12.5. A crazy finish. An absolutely crazy finish. Such a close match between the two of them. But it's Hikaru who qualifies. And of course, just so much respect to Wesley. So if I can just say, I'm going to say this on full screen mode. Wesley was so respectful in the post-game interview, as always is. He wished Hikaru a happy birthday, a lot of health, a lot of love. And then in the interview, all of them were joking about the fact that none of them were happy when Magnus Carlsen accepted his invitation to the Speed Chess Championship, because the only people that Wesley has lost to in the Speed Chess Championship are Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. So Wesley said, "Look, I was doing a lot of practice in Bullet, but there's nothing I can do. Hikaru is, I just need for him to get older or something." So semifinal number 1 is done. The second semifinal is going to be between Magnus Carlsen and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. That happens on the 11th. On the morning of the 12th, you will have a recap, or maybe on the evening of the 11th. Make sure to check that out right here, obviously, on this channel. And then whoever will qualify to face Hikaru in the finals. Hope you guys are enjoying. If you've made it this far, hi, leave a comment.